Hello everybody, I'm Cantonese Cat. Everybody, Cantonese Cat here. I want to spend some time talking about MicroStrategy. Usually I spend a few minutes on Danny's Patreon on the weekend to talk about stocks, and MicroStrategy is one of those that I generally talk about. I haven't really talked about MicroStrategy here in public for quite some time. A lot of holders have been holding, and it's been going down for months. If you ask me in terms of what I think about MicroStrategy, what I'm doing with MicroStrategy, I'll tell you exactly what I think. I no longer have a MicroStrategy position. I haven't had for I think like a couple months or so. What I did with my MicroStrategy, and it's a small position of mine, I never really liked to chase. MicroStrategy has gone up a lot over the last 2 years, and this is part of the reason why I don't really like to chase, because it's it's risky whenever it gets up a lot higher. What I ended up doing with MicroStrategy was that I sold my small MicroStrategy position a couple months ago, and I rotated it into BMNR. Why did I do that? Well, if you're looking at a comparison chart here, this is a monthly chart of BMNR over MicroStrategy. This is a ratio chart. So if the chart is looking good, that means that BMNR is looking like it wants to outperform MicroStrategy. If the chart is looking bad, that means MicroStrategy is going to probably outperform BMNR moving forward. And what I see is this: whenever they start announcing that they're going to be Ethereum Treasury, something happened. There's a big, giant push here for a month of July of this ratio of BMNR over MSTR, and it pushed it through above the 20-month moving average of this ratio. And initially it was negatively sloping, but something has drastically changed. It has basically flipped the 20-month moving average here from resistance here into now support. We are now above the 20-month moving average, and currently it wants to ride up along the upper Bollinger Band. The Bollinger Band is also expanding. The 20-month moving average is now starting to curl positively. So all of these are telling you that the trend of BMNR over MSTR is turning more positive here. Now, does it mean that it's just going to keep on outperforming MSTR, bam, 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 like that? No, not necessarily. You can end up having a little bit more rotation. MSTR can do a little bit better than BMNR, form a little bit of a higher low here, but the trend so far has been changed, because you can see the 20-month moving average is now really flipping more positive here. So I see the beginning sign of trend change. I see this trend change being maybe a little bit more impulsive moving forward. And because I saw opportunity here with BMNR potentially outperforming MicroStrategy, or strategy, I should say, Michael's strategy, moving forward, I end up rotating from one to another. Now, in addition to that, I was also noticing another chart here, which I don't really think I've shared with anybody. The left here is the MicroStrategy over Ethereum chart. This is a weekly chart. Over here is the ARK fund on basically ARK-G, the one that's been really beaten down a lot. This is the ARK-G fund on the monthly, and I basically see that the ratio of MicroStrategy over Ethereum has been very plummeting. It broke down underneath the 20-week moving average, back tested it, couldn't hold, it just went to low Bollinger Band. Right now it's just kind of hanging out here for a while. It could end up staying down here. It can end up making lower highs and lower low, and just keep underperforming, with MicroStrategy underperforming Ethereum here moving forward for the next year. Kind of like what ARK-G did here with a consolidation that lasted a lot longer than most people would expect. This lasted for about 2 years, so I think this could potentially last for all year. Who knows? With that said, we have a very negative sloping 20-week moving average over here. It's probably going to get rejected if we end up having a little bit of a high here. MicroStrategy can have a little bit of a recovery here against Ethereum, but that would most likely get rejected because the 20-week moving average is very negative slope. So because looking at this, if I have money, where would I put right now? Would I put it in MicroStrategy, or would I put it in BMNR, or would I put it in Ethereum? My answer, and this is not an answer for everybody, my answer looking at my technicals is I think I favor either BMNR or Ethereum, because it looks like MicroStrategy is showing some weakness here relative to both of those. Now, if you ask me whether or not MicroStrategy is done, whether or not MicroStrategy would not have another leg up higher, what is the liquidity condition looking now compared to what it was the last cycle? And is there some comparison that we can draw on? That doesn't mean that MicroStrategy is done? Does it mean that we're actually going to have another leg up higher and that people are just not paying attention to? That's a big question to answer. And the answer to you is, I don't know. That's it. That's the end of the video. But I'm going to try to speculate and kind of try to show you as to why I don't know. The reason why I don't know is because last cycle, the top here is the monthly chart for MicroStrategy. Bottom chart over here is the Russell 2000 or the IWM. You can see that last cycle, they both ran on very similar liquidity pools, meaning that whenever IWM, which is a more risk-on sentiment, whenever it ends up breaking above the previous resistance zone over here for a very long time, it went on a parabolic run. MicroStrategy also did the same thing here in November 2020 and went on a parabolic run afterwards. Here you have a little bit of discrepancy. MicroStrategy had front ran the IWM or Russell 2000, and whenever IWM or Russell 2000 got deleveraged over here in April, MicroStrategy actually had a green candle, a recovery. So there is some discrepancy here. Now, since then, because of this great deleveraging that had happened, the Russell 2000 was able to have 6 green months in a row because this is deleveraging and because this whole thing right here is accumulation. And I think this whole thing right here is reaccumulation. And we're right now at the verge of potentially having a breakout, maybe sometime in Q4, maybe sometime in Q1 next year, who knows? But instead of having this run up, together right into the breakout IWM where MicroStrategy had, you have about 4 or 5 months of downtrend here for MicroStrategy. This is a very big discrepancy between what I'm seeing here and the last cycle. There is a huge difference between these two, and it's really hard for me to kind of reconcile in terms of what this is. Because this over here could either be a distribution top like it was over here, or it could be reaccumulation. Nobody really knows. There's not really a way for you to really tell. Even volume can trick you. So it's very tough in terms of trying to tell which one it is. With that said, with IWM going up, I have a hard time really truly seeing MicroStrategy being over, right? But it's really hard when it comes to this. I'm going to show you that the morphology over here looks very similar to this morphology over here, right? You have a parabolic top over here. Some people say blow off top, come back down, have a little bit of distribution here, broke down, back test. The zone was not able to break back through, and down you go, right? Are we experiencing the same thing here, right? Look at the peaks and valleys. They look very similar when it comes to morphology. Well, there's a little bit of difference. First of all, the fit levels don't really match. If you look at the parabolic top over here, and I have a hard time drawing that with my mouse, but that's okay. You look at parabolic top over here and the cycle over here, you can see that it basically broke down underneath the 0.618 and it back tested it and failed, and it basically plummeted down, right? Are we at the same lower levels right now? Well, I would argue that we are not, because if you look at the cycle, not so cycle top, but the current top over here, which may be a cycle top, I don't really know, and the cycle bottom over here, you can see that it didn't really quite get down to the 0.618. We are at higher fit levels, so I might give it a little bit more of a benefit of a doubt that it may not be the distributed top like we are over here, and this could still be reaccumulation, but ultimately nobody really knows that, because even during this distribution here, it was happening on declining volume. Here, distribution here is going on declining volume too. So can reaccumulation. It usually happens with a declining volume here. So it's very tricky in terms of trying to figure out which one is which. Reaccumulation, this is one of the charts from gold back in 2021, 2023. Reaccumulation is shown here, and it can have very similar morphology as what MicroStrategy is having right now, right? This could be getting close to a spring, right? If we're getting close to a spring, that means that we might reverse the downtrend. This whole thing is just reaccumulation. That potentially mean that we're going to have another leg up higher, right? Are we at, let me get out of this. Are we at reaccumulation? No, I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that there is a little bit of difference here, what we're seeing here and what we're seeing here. And on top of that, if you're also trying to figure out where MicroStrategy could potentially end up finding support, a couple of things. First of all, if you're talking about elliott wave theory, and again, it's hard for me to say for sure, there's a possibility, and I've also see this with a lot of miners too, and this is one thing that I do theorize, there's a possibility this is wave 1, this is wave 2, and this is basically a greater wave 3 kind of thing, and wave 3 could basically end up having some, some corrective wave over here, and it could keep going. It's hard for me to say that, the cycle is going to be over. Could it go all the way down to 0.707? It's possible. This is the previous zone over here. Then you can go all the way down to 182, and that would still be a logical area for it to find support. Now, the other thing too is, could it, instead of looking at the log chart here, let's look at linear, right? Could it go all the way down to the 0.382 over here, which is around 215.62? That's also a possibility for it to hold, and that could be the spring that's needed for it to go up higher. But it's impossible for me to tell you whether or not it's reaccumulation or if it's distribution. Looking at the macro, looking at everything else that I'm looking at, I do think that this is probably still more likely to be a reaccumulation rather than distribution, but it's hard for me to say for sure. I also want to show you, and I don't want to show this, but I have to because I cannot not show what I'm seeing. Last month, it held the 20-month moving average barely. This month, we dropped underneath of that. I see this thing as like a 20-month moving average test. Not everything has to work out this way. Sometimes it doesn't, and we can reverse and it can just keep going up a lot higher. But I call it a 20-month moving average test. When it breaks down underneath the 20-month moving average, there are some signs to be worried about. And it did end up happening so far for the month of November. And I basically end up starting the month underneath of that, and now you're basically going lower, right? With NVIDIA, and we have about 3-4 cycles here to kind of look at with NVIDIA. With NVIDIA, usually if you find support here on the 20-month moving average, you go higher, right? If you don't find support, if you end up breaking down underneath the 20-month moving average, you might have some bearish backtest and some consolidation. Here, same thing, right? Broke down underneath the 20-month moving average, down to close to low voltage band we go, right? 2 more months of pain, and then up we go. Here, same thing, broke down underneath the 20-month moving average, spent about 8 months underneath before going up higher. Here, we found support here at the 20-month moving average, so we end up going higher. Is MicroStrategy cooked right now? Is it very similar to spot 2 over here as it broke down? Does it mean you have to go all the way down to low Bollinger Band? I don't know the exact answer to that. All I know is that it continues to show some weakness. And I do want to rotate more into strength. So I did sell MicroStrategy a couple months ago, and I rotated to BMNR. Granted, I'm also down on BMNR, but the technicals BMNR is different, and I do feel more confident on what BMNR and what Ethereum is going to do moving forward. I have a hard time necessarily saying that this is really distribution though, and because a lot of the market makers know that we're looking at these kinds of things, it's hard for me to really make conclusions out of this. First of all, sometimes these things can just reverse here in a hurry, because you can see what iron did. Iron also had a very, very big move upwards, right? And it did break down underneath the 20-month moving average, but it didn't go all the way down to low Bollinger Band. It just basically made a little false turnaround, and it just shot up way up from there, right? This whole thing right here is reaccumulation. The market makers knew I was looking at the 20-month moving average, so beating it down and brought it down underneath of it. And then there's next thing you know, iron just kind of kept going up a lot higher. So I don't necessarily can be sure this is really a distributed top. All I know is that it's showing some relative weakness compared to Ethereum, but it could still be reaccumulation, and there could still be another leg up. Why do I think it's reaccumulation? Is because if you look at the institutional accumulation, you can see that institutions have accumulated more shares. Initially, it was around, I can't even say it, 110 million shares have been accumulated by institutions. Right now, it's been basically gone up to about 160 million shares that's being accumulated by institutions, right? Now, you can say that they constantly dilute their shares, so is this just because an institution is just absorbing dilution? You could very well be right. This row here basically went up about 45-50%. If you look at the diluted share for MicroStrategy, you can see that over the last 3 quarters, they only gone up maybe around 35 to 40%. So I don't think the current downtrend is able to be accounted for based on the simple narrative that there is dilution. I don't think that's what's happening, although them having dilution could cause investors to have less confidence, and you can have a little bit more of a narrative change when it comes to that. I don't think that's happening. Another thing too, if MicroStrategy is showing some weakness, does it mean that Bitcoin is also showing some weakness? I don't think so. because Bitcoin is still following what I would expect it to do when you're comparing it together with the Russell 2000. Here I'm showing you the 20-month moving average. Whenever you're about the 20-month moving average, things are not cooked. Sometimes you can have things getting a little bit, lower and get closer to 20-month moving average. But as long as you get, you're still above the 20-month moving average, I'm not really thinking that we're cooked yet. The Bitcoin relative weakness generally happens around the time when you're about to have a breakout of the Russell 2000, the small cap stocks, right? Here is the breakout, showing signs of relative weakness here at the area. Here is a breakout, but right before that, showing some signs of some relative weakness, and also Bitcoin didn't really go up that much higher, unlike what the small cap or Russell 2000 ended up doing. It does have a little bit of area of relative weakness here. Now, we're not really truly like having that break apart yet. We are having a breakout, but currently, Bitcoin is still showing some relative weakness here, which is not unusual compared to what it was before the Ethereum breakout. So I don't necessarily feel that this is reflecting that Bitcoin is no longer have demand and that it's not going to go up higher. I favor Bitcoin going higher from here, despite of a lot of cries out there about bearish divergence, which I also have posted about, and I don't really necessarily buy into the whole bearish divergence narratives as well, but that's a different talk for a different time. What I'm trying to say is I still think that Bitcoin is behaving more or less what I would expect it to behave before it breaks out together with IWM or Russell 2000. I'm going to just keep an eye on it and lean a little bit more bullish on it because Bitcoin is still above the 20-month moving average, because Bitcoin is still behaving like I would expect, from a cycle. With that said, this is the MicroStrategy over Bitcoin chart. Now, you can see that it's been outperforming Bitcoin by a lot, right? Almost unreasonably so. I mean, they are a leverage play for Bitcoin, sure. And the ratio of MicroStrategy over Bitcoin on the monthly here has broken above the monthly Ichimoku cloud and went up a lot higher. Now, it tried to hold the Tengen and Kitchen here, but now you had a bearish cross. Now you have a relative weakness of MicroStrategy over Bitcoin for 5 months in a row. Now you're having a hard time trying to figure out, hey, how much more underperformance can MicroStrategy have relative to Bitcoin? Does it go all the way down to the cloud over here? It's possible, right? Initially, I was thinking it could potentially hold the zone over here where like MicroStrategy would stop bleeding against Bitcoin, and you do a fit level here, the 0.382 here could be a logical area, but end up breaking down underneath for the month of November. So the underperformance of MicroStrategy against Bitcoin looks like it wants to continue here for the short term, maybe even get down to 0.0017 on the ratio here. Hard for me to say, right? Hard for me to swallow because I did not expect this to happen. This is something that is absolutely incredible to see, right? Where MicroStrategy goes down when IWM and liquidity is actually going up. This is something that I was not expecting to see, but because I do see some relative weakness of MicroStrategy against Ethereum, against BMNR, I'm no longer holding a position. Now, looking at this over here, this is the Ethereum over Bitcoin chart. Is Ethereum going to outperform Bitcoin? Well, it did not for about 3 years, and then next thing you know, Ethereum ended up having a breakout, and next thing you know, Ethereum ended up having a breakout to a logical area where it started to take a break here when it's, a ratio against Bitcoin. And so far, we're building a little bit more of like a rising 3 methods, where you have 3 red candle here that's being engulfed by this previous green candle over here. If it's not able to break underneath the green candle over here, then you have usually a bullish engulfing candle that engulf all 3 the next month, which means that maybe December could potentially be a pretty good month here for Bitcoin, for Ethereum over Bitcoin. Just because Ethereum outperforms Bitcoin doesn't mean that Bitcoin is going to do badly. Now, a lot of times when you have increased in Ethereum performing really well against Bitcoin, Bitcoin also goes up, right? So the Bitcoin top last cycle is probably around it was actually around like November 2021, right? But the entire time during the parabolic bull run, Ethereum was doing a lot better than Bitcoin. So actually having Ethereum outperforming Bitcoin here is actually not a bad thing. And this whole thing has just been consolidating sideways over here for about 3 months now. Very, very interesting, right? It's also finding a support zone from before. It's also holding a support zone relatively well. It's also got a pretty decent rising 3 methods over here. Now, on the contrary, we look at the opposite side here. This is Bitcoin dominance. This is the percentage of market cap that of the entire cryptocurrency market cap that belongs to Bitcoin. You can see that it has change of character here, where you have two really red candles, and currently instead of a rising 3 like I was showing you earlier, it has a little bit of falling 3. You have a big red candle here engulfing the 3 current candles, and there's a possibility that if we don't break back above this red candle over here, next drop is going to be downwards, and that would be very bullish for not just Bitcoin, not just Ethereum, but it's going to be a start of something that's going to be a little bit more parabolic here for the entire cryptocurrency market. Now, is this a logical area for defined resistance at? Yes, because it basically got rejected here at 0.786, broke down underneath the 0.618 and got rejected here at the 0.618 here twice now. Went all the way up to 0.707, got rejected there, got rejected at 0.618 here for a second month in a row. Logical area to go down 0.5, right? So that's kind of what I'm seeing here when it comes to Bitcoin dominance. You also look at the weekly chart here. You can see how Bitcoin dominance is forming a very weak bear flag over here. And if I pull up some moving averages here, where I'm just going to basically show the 20, 50, and 100, it basically broke down underneath the 20, broke down underneath the 50, test 100, found support, trying to break through 50, it got rejected twice, trying to break through a negative sloping 20 here, not able to because it's negative sloping. This is a trend change, right? You can see how for almost 3 years in a row, 20 greater than 50 greater than 100, nice bull trend. As things go up, it got weaker, tested the 50 here, went back up anyway. Now you broke down underneath the 50 and go to 100. This is trend change. And you also see that the 2050 depth cross over here for Bitcoin dominance. I don't think Bitcoin dominance is going to go up that much higher. Maybe that's why market makers or the market participants are sniffing out that Ethereum may outperform Bitcoin here moving forward. And there's a little bit of rotation here happening. And during this rotation, there's always going to be a cool down for everything because they need to sell before they can rotate. I think that's what's happening based on what I'm seeing. And I think that MicroStrategy still has a good chance to recover the 20-month moving average if what I think is correct when it comes to the entire cryptocurrency market cap is not dead yet, and Bitcoin being the father of all cryptocurrency. I think that Bitcoin is probably going to do well, and if that's the case, MicroStrategy, I have a hard time really seeing it going down all the way down to the 70s. I just have a hard time seeing that. With that said, what would I do if I was holding MicroStrategy? And none of this is financial advice because MicroStrategy could end up recovering well. Like, I'm basically not telling you anything in terms of what MicroStrategy is doing. You can go all the way down to a low bullish band. I find it to be a less likely scenario because global liquidity, because Russell 2000 about to break out. I just have a hard time seeing not having enough liquidity to find decent support here for MicroStrategy. I have a hard time seeing that. But that's one scenario. The other scenario is for it to bounce back up above 20 and continue, and this whole thing right here is just reaccumulation, and then you don't have to do anything. You can even buy here, right? How do you prepare for each scenario? I don't. I just basically end up rotating to something that's stronger. But if you want to look into exiting MicroStrategy, and this is not financial advice, and this is not something that I am 100% sure because I'm lining this up with the iron chart here and to tell you that it doesn't always work out. Here, you can exit out here right at the 20-month moving average and at a bearish backtest, and wasn't able to hold, and down we go. But understand that there's also a scenario where it can be like iron, where it broke down underneath and backtest to 20. And if you have sold at $7, you just missed the whole rally right there. So I don't know what to do. All I know is I would like to chase something that's stronger. And to me, that's BMNR, and to me, that's Ethereum. So those are my thoughts, and they might be thoughts of a mad cat. But those are my honest thoughts that I just kept on rambling on for about 24 minutes. Thank you so much for listening to this video. I hope you find this helpful. And I am positioned more heavily into Ethereum exposure than I am with MicroStrategy. I don't have any exposure to MicroStrategy right at this moment. But thank you so much for listening, guys. Have a good one. Bye.